Hello everybody, CVM here with
BVD.
BVD for a deck tech for the Boros burn deck, I guess that's what we'll call it, that Darren Menard played to a top 8 in Grand Prix Dallas this weekend. So Dallas might have been covered in ice, but you wouldn't be able to tell from this deck because he was lighting people up all weekend.
Ooh.
I really do like this deck a lot, and as we all know, I have quite a love for Chandra Pyromaster and War Leader's Helix, and I've been trying to find a way to make those cards work, and I think this might be the deck. In addition to that, there's Young Pyromancer, which hasn't really found a home in Standard yet, but I think this is the type of deck that you're wanting to play Young Pyromancer in. So this deck is actually very simple. It's just a bunch of cheap burn, some efficient and resilient creatures, and a couple removal spells. So it's it's about as streamlined as you can get, but some of the cards are very interesting. So Shock, Lightning Strike, and Magma Jet are all just the premier burn spells available in the format. And I think that if you're going to play a deck with Young Pyromancer in it, you don't really want to leave home without them.
Yeah, one thing I think is interesting is Magma Jet, Lightning Strike, and Mizium Mortars are all 2-mana burn spells for 1 in a red that do different amounts of damage, and they're all good in different positions. Like, they're all still good. There's none that are just invalidated by the other.
Yeah,
it's kind of cool, yeah.
It's actually pretty interesting. And then we have Shock that I think is a little underrated, but still very, very good. We have cards like Pack Rat in the format, and it's very important, since it costs 1 mana, that we're able to get value out of our Young Pyromancer. We're wanting the cards to be as cheap as possible so that we can cast multiple spells once we untap with the Pyromancer in play. Fingers crossed it's still alive.
Untap with the Pyromancer in play? What was that? One thing I think is interesting about this deck is it's actually kind of a control deck. And then that's not like, I don't think that's obviously apparent maybe just by looking at the list. You're playing a bunch of burn spells, Young Pyromancer, Chandra's Phoenix, but the deck actually plays like a control deck where you want to kill all of your opponent's creatures and then eventually find a way to kill them, usually with like some sort of residual amount of damage like from Chandra's Phoenix or Chandra.
Now, we do also have two cards that are burn spells but don't go at our opponent's creatures, with Boros Charm and Skullcrack. So both of these cards do a couple different things, and I think that they're both very good right now. Boros Charm is a great way at pressuring Planeswalkers or just dealing the last few points of damage if you need to finish somebody off. But it also will allow us to save our creatures from like a Supreme Verdict. So against like the Esper deck, we get a Pyromancer in play, they don't have an answer for it, we're just generating all these 1/1s to pressure them. At some point they're going to have to try and Supreme Verdict. Boros Charm protects our team and even gives us another token at that point.
Yeah, that's pretty sweet.
And then Skullcrack is just very, very good against like Sphinx's Revelation. It's also a way to stop creatures with protection from a color from actually having damage prevented to them. So let's say a Master of Waves blocks like our Young Pyromancer, we can Skullcrack them, and then they'll actually trade, or it'll stop the life gain from like a Blood Baron, or if our opponent has a whip and they attack with a bunch of creatures, we can stop the life gain and then try and kill them the next turn. Plus, it's just another good way to pressure Planeswalkers. 3 damage for 2 mana is still very good.
Yeah, and there's a lot of life gain going on right now. Grey Merchant as well is another example.
Yeah, Grey Merchant's also
of something you want to Skullcrack. So I think the card's very good and like definitely main deckable in a shell like this.
Absolutely. Now we do have War Leader's Helix as well, which is one of my favorite cards actually. 4 damage for 4 mana and you gain 4 life is very good. It's can swing the game very, very easily against like an aggressive deck or another mid-range deck. But I also like having War Leader's Helix in the deck because it makes Chandra's Ultimate like an actual viable way to kill our opponents. So a lot of times we're going to be using our spells very effectively to keep Chandra alive or make sure that our opponent isn't killing us, and then at some point we're going to be able to Ultimate Chandra, and if you hit a War Leader's Helix with it, they're just actually dead.
Yeah, and as both of us have found out from playing Chandra decks, it's actually pretty easy to ultimate her.
Yeah, it's very easy.
She's pretty robust. So.
She got a big old booty.
Yeah,
it's very difficult to get rid of Chandra when she's actually in play. And now we do have the sole only white card in the deck with Chain to the Rocks. It's just a very good way for us to handle all of the creatures that our burn can't take care of, like Desecration Demon. So previously, when playing Chandra decks in the past, there wasn't a Desecration Demon wasn't being played, but Thunder Hellkite was. And so creatures with 5 or 6 toughness are very difficult to handle with this deck, and Chain to the Rocks just actually gives us an answer.
It's also very good against Master of the Waves.
Yes, it is.
Considering he is protection from red.
Protection from red. Now, moving on to the lands for the deck, there's only 22. The curve for the deck is fairly low. There was a version of this that top 16 in Vienna that didn't have Pyromancer but had Storm Breaths and an extra land. I actually like Pyromancer a little bit better, and I'm excited to try it out. But we also just get to play, these Temple of Silences. It gives us white mana for our white spells, allows us to scry. It even lets us fuse a card in our sideboard with the black mana, which is pretty sweet.
And yeah, having like 8 temples is like going to really fix the mana a lot, especially with Magma Jet too.
Yeah.
You have so many ways to scry that playing 22 lands, like if you need to hit more, you don't want to draw more than like 4 lands. Because it's like so important with this deck that you have like such a heavy spell density because none of your spells are like good enough by themselves.
Yep.
So yeah, like having the ability to scry excess lands away in the late game is like extremely important and really one of the reasons why I think this deck's pretty good.
Yeah, just between the 8 temples and the 4 Magma Jets, there's a lot of scrying going on, and hopefully we can scry correctly, because I tend to scry incorrectly and then realize that the following turn that what I did was incorrect. So it'll be some good practice for that. Now the sideboard is pretty streamlined, and there's some unique cards in it, so let's go and take a look at the sideboard. Here we have the sideboard for our Boros Burn deck. And we've got some interesting cards here in the sideboard, starting with Toil and Trouble. So against the blue-white control decks or the Esper control decks, or even against the black-based control decks, their goal is to have as many cards in hand as possible to answer all of the threats that we'll be able to throw at them. And this just allows us to sneak in some damage that they might not be expecting. Especially if we're on the play, a lot of times we can Trouble on turn 3 and just actually get a full 7 points of damage, which is pretty insane.
Yeah, I mean, that's definitely a pretty troubling card for a lot of the Esper decks to deal with.
Absolutely. And then we do have the black-white temples in the deck, so we can actually fuse it if needed, or if we need to, we can just pay 3 mana and be able to draw cards ourselves, since at the very least it is just a Sign of Blood. Now we do have Spark Trooper as well on the sideboard. It's not a card that's seen a lot of constructed play.
I'd like to actually interject and say that it did see a lot of play in block constructed. And that's my interjection for the day.
Fair enough. It hasn't seen a lot of standard play.
There we go.
But I think it is a pretty interesting card, especially against some of the aggressive decks, just as a way to, at the very least, gain 6 life and do some damage to them. So a lot of times, the aggressive decks aren't really capable of racing a deck that has the potential to gain 6 or 4 life from the cards in its deck, and it just allows us to get out of reach of them killing us so that we can burn them out.
Yeah, like a lot of times you're gonna kill their early wave, but they're gonna get a couple creatures that you don't have removal spells for, and then it's just gonna turn into a race. And having Helix and Spark Trooper means you'll probably end up winning the race. So.
Absolutely. Along the same lines, Boros Reckoner is very good against those decks too. Anything that plans on attacking us with 1 or 2 drops, Boros Reckoner is going to be very good against them. And then we also have Assemble the Legion, which is a card that's sort of been proven to be very good against the Black Devotion decks. I honestly don't really like it against the Esper or blue-white decks myself, but I definitely do like it against the black-based Devotion decks, because with the rest of our deck, they're really not able to pressure us enough, so the game is going to go long, and Assemble at some point will end up taking over. It's also very good against Desecration Demon.
Yeah, against the blue decks, I definitely agree with you. They have Jace and Detention Sphere are both very good answers against it.
Yep.
So it's not and the fact that it costs 5 means by the time you get it down, usually they've kind of sculpted their hand by that point. So it's definitely not that great there. But if you can get Chain to the Rocks a demon, Lightning Strike a Night Veil Spectre, and take it to the long game against a mono black deck, Assemble's going to take over.
Absolutely. So this is the sideboard for the Burn deck. I'm definitely excited to play it. I feel like it's going to be a little more challenging to play than it looks on paper, with just a bunch of burn decks or a bunch of burn cards and creatures. But those are the types of decks that I do enjoy playing, and I'm looking forward to getting some games in. So let's go ahead and jump into the battle.